Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Candy, CEO of Responsible Futures and Candy Consulting and Events. Our consultancy provides sustainability and social responsibility solutions for companies of all sizes. We work with a range of leading consultants and organisations to help companies on their ESG and CSR journeys. We have consultants that specialise in carbon footprint measurement, net zero strategies, energy review and consulting on renewables, ESG frameworks, strategies to align with the UN SDGs, and consultants that can support you with accreditations such as CSRA and B-corp. If you are just starting out and are looking for a review with a gap analysis, or you want a full end-to-end review, strategy, plan and implementation, then we can help. We also have a weekly podcast called Sustain Talks and run monthly webinars like this, where we look at topics around sustainability and social responsibility. Coming up, we have Why Net Zero Matters, the S in ESG, Why Social Value Matters, and many more to follow. All of our webinars and podcasts are free, as we want to help to educate, inspire, and guide many people on sustainability and social responsibility. If you wish to connect with me on LinkedIn, then please do. My LinkedIn is going to go in the chat, or you can email me directly. But welcome to today's webinar, Does ESG Matter? I am joined by Muriel Belay, Gavin Lendon and Richard Collins, who we'll hear more about in a minute. Companies, their investors and other stakeholders are becoming increasingly interested in ESG, environmental, social and governance, with increased concern about the ethical status of publicly traded corporations. These principles are the most important variables in determining the ethical impact and long-term viability of a company's investment. We're going to delve deeper into ESG and find out more about what it means. Let's start with an introduction to our panelists. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourselves? Muriel, in the sunshine there, can we start with you?
Good morning, all. I think for the quality of the sound, I think it's better if all the other people on the panel were on mute. Thank you. My name is Muriel. I'm the founder of a sustainability consultancy called Be Otherwise. My background is the food industry and a lot of environmental supporting in the background. And a couple of years ago, I jumped the ship and decided that it was time to actually marry head and heart and help businesses on their sustainability journey. And actually, when I'm asked what I do for a living, I don't talk about sustainability. I talk about helping people to do more good, because I think at the end of the day, this is what it's all about, is doing good for people and planet. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Muriel. And Gavin, should we go over to you?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gavin from Sustainology. It's a sustainability consultant. What we do is basically plan sustainability strategies, bit of ESG, that kind of thing. Sam's already mentioned gap analysis, that kind of stuff. We help people from the start of their journey to go through and just, as Muriel said, become better. Originally trained as an accountant, but I've recovered now. I've developed a personality. I'm GRI qualified, which you'll find out more about as the webinar continues. Over to Richard.
Richard, please.
Thank you, Gavin and Sam. Yeah, my name's Richard Collins. I'm the co-founder and chief exec of CSR Accreditation, the only accreditation body for social responsibility, based on a standard that we've developed and a framework on the 4 pillars of environment, workplace, philanthropy and community. And we support that with CSR training and also social impact report writing. I also sit on the all-party parliamentary group for ESG, and I'm a trustee for the Community Foundation Trust Heart of Bucks, as well as president of the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce for Buckinghamshire.
Thank you, and thanks everyone. So we're going to get right stuck in, and I'm sure there's going to be a difference of opinion, but I think that that's important too when it comes to these topics. But I'd like to hear from you individually on what you think about ESG and what it is in your eyes. Muriel, I'd like to start with you.
So I'm going back to my introduction, really. So ESG was, it's an acronym that stands for Environment, Society and Governance. It was initially created by financial institutions to evaluate the performance and most importantly, the risk that their investees face with anything to do with environment and society. I think nowadays it's used much more loosely, and it's about any activity that has got to do with people and planet. And again, you know, it's about driving positive impact through your business activity and making sure that you make your business resilient and fit for the future.
And over to you, Gavin. Any different views from Muriel?
I'm just going to build on what Muriel said. I agreed wholeheartedly that originally it was founded, ESG was talked about originally in 2004, 2005. It started with Kofi Annan talking to the financial community saying, can you work together with us on this? The first time it was mentioned was in 2005. Basically, it was financially driven, as Muriel said, and to do with risk. The whole concept was to recognize that non-financial impacts such as climate change and biodiversity loss, etc., were becoming important to corporates and also the stakeholders in the wider community. As we're probably going to progress into the webinar, we're going to discover the fact that sustainability, ESG, corporate social responsibility, they are overlapping, and that's where it gets a little bit more contentious, as we'll find. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Muriel and Gavin. I think, yeah, you kind of both of you hit the nail on the head. It's something that's evolved out of a requirement for the investment markets to look at future opportunities for business as they kind of move towards a net zero and carbon future, low carbon future, and also looking at the risks. So, you know, no one wants to invest in a company that has a risk associated with it if they're not going to change the way they operate as future regulation comes into play. But of course, it has to, it is a function. And it's a function of sustainability, and it's a function of social responsibility. So organizations need to have things in place that they're already delivering on for ESG to be properly used as a measurement tool to kind of record and validate what they're doing. So I think, you know, where this is going to be an interesting conversation is around, you know, the framework of ESG, you know, where the regulation is to support it, how it's validated, and how, you know, organizations that communicate their ESG are able to evidence that they're doing everything that they say they are to create the value around their ESG recording and scoring.
Thank you. So just talking a bit more about what that framework, because I think that's a lot where the confusion lies, that there is a framework around ESG, and you know, you can still be sustainable and socially responsible without the framework. But can you just have talk about the framework, and does any company have to be on the framework? Can you just Richard, could you speak a bit more about that, please?
Well, I think it's about audience. I think the thing about CSR, CSR is about engaging your people. It's about talking to your staff, to your customers, to your consumers. It's about kind of recruitment and retention, enriching people's lives through delivering, you know, good social and environmental responsible actions. Whereas I think ESG has a different audience within an organisation, so it's concerned about the same things, you know, in terms of, you know, the environment and social issues, but it talks really to the board, to the investors, to the shareholders, to the chief executives. So in a way, it's a different language, and therefore, you know, you can look at CSR or social responsibility, as I call it, or sustainable actions, and there will be things that are relevant purely to the CSR agenda and not relevant to the ESG agenda. And then there are going to things that you can pull out of that that are very, very relevant. So you could talk about charitable engagement, which is brilliant for staff engagement, volunteering and all that kind of stuff, which may not be necessarily relevant for reporting, for your ESG reporting. But nevertheless, it's still very important. So I think the thing is, Gavin mentioned that it's like a Venn diagram, there is an overlap, and all of that is important. So it's not, you know, I mean, I've used the word symbiotic. Social responsibility and ESG are symbiotic. They cannot exist without each other. It's a question of how that framework works. And I think, you know, we've established the framework of the 4 pillars: environment, workplace, community, and philanthropy, and they map beautifully to the ESG criteria. So the thing is, you can then pull out of those 4 pillars the things that are relevant for ESG reporting. And it's about making it accessible and simple. I think we'll touch later onto organizational size, because, you know, ESG for Coca-Cola is a very, very different animal than it is for a local firm of solicitors up the road. And so it's a question of what frameworks people can use that are accessible and enable them to deliver the information they need to deliver.
Yeah. From your point of view, Gavin, and Muriel too, have you worked with companies of different sizes? I think, you know, is there on the framework, do you have to be a certain size? Is it companies over 500 or under 500? I know there's a mixture of people from different size companies here, small, medium and large. But what's the legislation around being on the ESG framework? Gavin, if you want to start.
First of all, just touching on the point about, is ESG relevant to a company of any size? I think Richard's point is very valid. If you regard ESG sustainability as interchangeable, which again we'll come on to later, then yes, it is essential in my personal view, simply because if you look at how attitudes have changed over the last, well, given the fact I've got grey hair, over the last 2 decades or so, employees now are looking for more purposeful work. You know, when I graduated, people stayed in a job for 5-10 years. Talking to my colleagues or people my age now who are now managers, people coming out of college now in schools and universities are staying 2 to 3 years and want to work for a purposeful company. So that concept of purpose again is tied into ESG and sustainability. Customers are changing. Customers now want to buy products that are sustainable in some shape or form. So with these changes in society, ESG and sustainability is becoming more important to companies of any size. In terms of the regulatory frameworks, they are progressing as well. Richard will come on to the fact that there's the CSR kind of legislation coming into the EU soon. The UK's introduced TCFDs. So these are at the moment currently affecting larger companies, but there'll be a trickle down, I'm sure.
Yeah. And Muriel, anything to add on that?
I have to confess I forgot the question, but I think it's
around the legislation.
It's about
the size of
large or small. I think, you know, to add to what has been said so far, I would like to instill the sense of urgency, which therefore needs to be a collective approach, and therefore small or big, just start if you haven't yet, and then do your best. It's a global crisis that we're addressing here. It's about the future of your business, but you know, the future of many more things on the planet. And I think it doesn't matter if you're big or small, it doesn't matter, or if you are subjected to mandatory reporting or not. It's just do it for your kids, you know, do it because it matters, you know, do it because you want, you know, to have a business in 10 years time, and you want your kids to have a decent life in 50 years time. I think it's, and therefore, whether your thing is about, you know, being diligent in your food waste composting, or, you know, being able to fund, you know, rewilding projects in the UK, both are very valid and both needs to take place.
I think you brought up an important point, and we was actually talking yesterday about, you know, giant warehouses being put up in green spaces, and it might be worth us actually talking about the issues that we're facing and the climate crisis. Actually, I'm going to come back to you, Muriel, because I know it's a big passion of yours. But do you want to talk more about what we're facing? It might also be worth mentioning the Ipcc report. We had COP26. I think these things have driven interest even further, but also sharing with our attendees that the importance of why we must act now and why we need to do something now.
In 2 minutes, obviously. Okay. Thank you, Sam. So I'll start with the Ipcc reports. Yeah, so there has been 3 Ipcc reports issued over the past 6 months. These are reports from detailing the things of scientists around the world about climate change. And it's all about demonstrating without the shadow of a doubt, I think, hear me out, without a shadow of a doubt that the current climate changes that we're observing, the extreme weather instances that we are witnessing are due to human activity on this planet. It's not conducive to a good life on the planet for human beings, nor it is for any other species. The only way we can reverse it is if we change the way we behave as human beings. And I think the importance of talking about this now to businesses is that the private sector has got a huge power to change consumer behavior, to change business behavior, to change the way business is being thought about. It's no longer just about, filling the pockets of shareholders. It's about generating profit that is shared out with the community to support the transition and regenerative activities that prevents the climate change to go further. Everybody in the audience would have heard about this, 1.5 degree increase in the global average temperature. Above that increase, we're going to have to really face with difficult situations. And I'm choosing my words because my purpose here is not to scare people, but to really instill the need for urgency and immediate actions. There is no doubt that it's happening. There is no doubt it's because of human beings and business activities. We are the problem, therefore we can be the solution. I would stop there.
Thank you. And I think it is important to mention that. Gavin, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I'll just emphasize the urgency. I think whilst we've got the conflict going on in Ukraine, it's kind of under the radar slightly that the temperatures in India and Pakistan are horrendous. And if you look carefully, I should say, you can see the reports in Reuters, and then there's some on the BBC website. But the level of temperature over there is horrendous, and that will be one of the first kind of realizations of climate change, that there's going to be such increases in temperature in certain places of the world that they're going to be impossible to live in, which is going to start mass migrations, and then that's when the problems are really going to begin.
Yeah, and Richard, for businesses, do you think that they can do enough? Do you think that if we, I think at the moment, leaving it to the government, as the Ipcc reports say, we're not doing enough from a government point of view. So we have to turn to businesses and get them to change. Do you think it's enough? What can they do?
Well, yeah, and I just want to pull this back to the ESG agenda, really, because I don't think it matters what we call it, whether it's social value, sustainability, corporate responsibility, social responsibility. It's what we do that's important, not what we call it, because people are going to have a different way that they approach this. And we try and create a map that guides people to create a culture within their organization that enables them to do the right thing, to have a lighter touch on the planet, to support their staff, and to integrate with the community in a way that delivers meaningful impact. So the problem I find with things like COP26 and so on and so forth is that sometimes it goes above the heads of the ordinary person to have the ability to do something about it. And therefore COP is great for the corporates and great for government to really put in legislation and regulation to change the way we behave and do things. But I'm also interested in the way that, you know, social responsibility and sustainability can actually tap into the individual within an organization so that we feel that we can all contribute. And whether that's just turning lights off or shutting doors or cycling to work or eating less meat, it's about how we, you know, I'm a great believer that millions of micro gestures have huge impacts. And it's how we can, you know, change the dial. And I'm very optimistic that we can change the dial on this. But it's creating the enablement within an organization that does that. And the problem with a strict ESG agenda, it's very top down. And it's very conceptual, and it's very difficult sometimes to engage your staff in, whereas the social responsibility sustainability agenda can be a bottom-up approach. And I think the two meet in the middle, where you start to get the value at both ends. The great thing about the ESG agenda is that it is about making companies thinking about, you know, what they're going to do to change the way they behave with regards to environmental issues and social issues. So how can we become a greener organization? How can we make our products and services more sustainable? How can we engage social issues? Because it's not just about the environment, it's also about mental health and well-being and inclusivity and diversity. It's about good corporate governance. So there are lots of things there that we need to be encouraging businesses to do. And I think the Greta Thunberg, it's all blah, 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 was very, very true. Governments talk like that. We don't. Business acts and business gets things done. And it's getting things done now because it's being commercially driven. And that's a game changer as far as I'm concerned.
Can I just add one more point? Richard's completely right. And I think that what's been doing the rounds on the social media is how much Elon Musk is playing for Twitter as compared to the US budget on climate change. Business has the money, business has the motivation, business can deliver. Politicians are looking to be re-elected. That's all I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, you know, when you think about how much he spent on Twitter versus world hunger, and, you know, these things can be changed. I don't understand the importance of going up to space compared to the people that are living on this planet today. And I think that they're important issues, and any business that supports those, you know, if you don't support those issues, I'm moving away from businesses, and I think many people are, and this is why ESG is becoming more relevant, because consumers are making choices because of companies' ESG values. I want to go a bit deeper into the E, the S, and the G, because again, I think, you know, for a lot of businesses, they're like, okay, so where do we start? What do we? Let's talk a bit more about the S, but let's start with the E. When we're looking at the ESG, sustainability and social responsibility strategy, what do we need to do with the E? What do businesses need to do when we're looking at the E? Richard, let's start with you.
Well, like I've said, I think it's, you know, how can a business do something immediately? And when we talk about the environment, the E section, we look at reducing, you know, running to net zero. So how can we reduce our energy? How can we transition to renewables, or operate a building that's much more efficient? In terms of waste management, I'm a big fan about zero landfill. How can we get to zero landfill? So how can we repurpose, reuse, recycle materials and goods? And in terms of travel, doing something like this is very good because, you know, we're not having to travel to meet. So, you know, the government cycle to work schemes, car sharing, you know, reducing our travel, reducing our impact on resources like water and gas and electricity, you know, LED lighting. There's so many things. And going back to the thing I said about micro gestures, if every country, and in fact, this is what actually did happen in the UK, many companies changed to LED. And in 2020, that had a 22% reduction on the national electricity bill across all businesses, across all, you know, all homes and housing, because we had, like, you know, football stadiums going to LED lights, shopping malls going to LED lights. It wasn't like a 0.2% impact. It was a 22% reduction in energy. And that is absolutely huge.
And that, there's things like that, they're going to make huge impacts on the environment. And obviously, as we switch to electric vehicles and using more electric and other renewable solutions, then I think that it's important that we think about what is available as well. But Muriel, anything to add on the environmental piece? What other things do you think that businesses?
So much more. I think we need to redefine what business growth is about. I think we need to define the way businesses use natural resources, and we need to redefine what we provide as goods and services. There's an ongoing transition towards what we call service economy, where you make a piece of garment and you don't sell it, you lease it, so that it's leased for 2 years. It's a pair of jeans I'm going to talk about. It's an example. I've got no shares in this business. The mud where you lease a pair of jeans for 6 months, you get bored of it. Instead of it, you send it back to them. They churn it. They make a new pair of jeans out of it. And I think we need to protect the resources that we have. We've plundered them. We've taken so much out of the planet that we need to review what consumption means, whether we need to stop making new things. So therefore, it requires business to rethink, does it mean for a business to thrive? It might not be to sell more and more things. It's the way you engage with your end user that needs to change. And I think I'm really zooming out away from energy, away from waste, because absolutely they need to take place. But I think it's a business model that needs to change, and then everything else will happen. But it's behaviors. It's fundamental about what do you want your business to do to contribute to the solution. Making more sustainable thing is not going to solve the issue, because making more things means using more natural resources.
Do you want to add anything to the environment piece?
Just upon something Muriel said, we're touching on circularity and the circular economy. Going forward, the circular economy is going to be essential, because strange enough, resources will become more and more scarce. Mud jeans is a great example. There's other examples. Philips, I think, are providing light bulbs or lighting to various London on a lease basis. So you pay for your room to be lit. You don't pay for the light bulb. That mindset, I think, that Muriel described, is essential going forwards. Coming back to the original question, which was some time ago, in terms of the in terms of what businesses can do, there is already sort of mandatory disclosures for larger companies in terms of the energy use, et cetera, et cetera. I suspect in time that will trickle down. It's probably trickling down a little bit already, because large financial institutions require borrowers to actually sort of inform them of their carbon reduction plans. So that in itself is actually beginning to happen. This I think comes back to something Richard and myself were talking about earlier in terms of what's the government's role. I think the government's role is to guide via policy, not necessarily to do. I think, as we described earlier, the actors in this circumstance is probably business. They're best placed to actually solve some of the issues. We'll get on to the subject of UN sustainability goals in due course. One of them is responsible consumption, and that one is a hot topic. Anyway, back to you, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks. Before we get onto those, I know we've still got 30 minutes and there's a lot to get through, I know. But let's have a look at the social piece, because I think when we talk about ESG, We do really focus on the E, and maybe not enough, in my opinion, on the S. But before I ask someone to respond, if you want to put any questions in, there's a Q&A box at the bottom, then please do. I'm happy to ask the panelists. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat too, but if you pop any questions on the Q&A, then we'll be able to see them. But let's just go a little bit deeper into the S, into the social part of ESG. Muriel, again, if you don't mind starting.
I mind awfully. For me, the S is essential for the E and the G to be successful. I have a very simplistic view that if people are happy, they will take care of the planet, and because they will be able to reconnect with the planet. So providing people with the right wages, the right condition to work, the right motivation to go to work every morning, then you create the right mindset for behavior change that is required. So the S is so vast, and I will just choose, diversity and inclusion. I will, look at what it really means to bring people from different backgrounds to your teams, to your board, so that you get different perspectives. You get, a much richer context and a much richer team that have got, various perspectives on, the situation you are in, different level of knowledge on, your customers, your suppliers, etc. So it's bringing everybody to the fore. And without wanting to sound crass, diversity and inclusion is the only way that, businesses are going to be able to carry on, because a lot of people have decided not to return to employment after the pandemic. The pool of people that really want to be employed today is much smaller than what it was 2 years ago. And I think, including everybody in your team, suddenly you are, dipping into a much vaster range of people that have got fabulous abilities to share with your business. So it's just an example of the S.
Yeah, Richard, over to you. You want to talk a bit more about the S?
Yeah, well, like Muriel said, it's vast. It's huge. Where do you start? We break it down. The S fits in within the workplace and the community side of things. So, and a little bit from the ESG, it touches into the governance as well. But I think good social responsibility is about engaging people in a way that allows them to deliver social value. And so we've often talked about the return on social investment and social return on investment. So, the driver for business to engage in a way that is good for its bottom line, but at the same time is addressing those social issues both within their business so again, Muriel's picked on diversity and inclusion, and one of the other big ones I think is around mental health and well-being. And a good way to address mental health and well-being is allowing people within the organisation to have a degree of autonomy and say and engagement and enablement in how that business runs with regards to its responsibilities. So if a business is inclusive in allowing its staff, its people to talk about recycling, talk about mental health, talk about D&I, talk about apprenticeships, talk about community engagement, local economic development, all of these things, then it brings them along on the journey and contributes to their sense of enrichment and well-being. So the S is very, very important. It does sit between the E and the G, and both of those don't exist without the S. Someone said ages ago that, you look after the community will look after you. And I think the same thing applies for business. Businesses that engage in a way that supports the community through social issues like social isolationism, like mental health and wellbeing, like supporting charities, that is really important glue that drives the success of the business, both reputationally and in terms of its own long-term sustainability. So I think, I could go on forever about the S. It doesn't end. It's all-encompassing. It's such a big area. But I think that what we do find is that there's a desire, there was something I was talking yesterday about the fact that there are 213 million businesses registered on the world. 10% of those businesses are engaged at some level in social responsibility and sustainability and ESG. It's not that the 90% aren't. They all want to do stuff. They just don't know how to approach it. And we find from our CSRA perspective that every business we engage with are delivering on those social values, on those environmental values. They're just not bringing it together in a way that they can communicate to create those really important impacts.
Yeah, and I think that it's becoming less of a tick box. You know, you've really got to do it from the heart, you know, the social side. I've done a lot recently on mental health and well-being, and I agree with you, Muriel, that businesses now, they really need to attract talent, and you know, part of that is going to be the work they do around the social side, and really sort of bringing people, making them feel part of their company. But let's go over to the G, the governance. Gavin, because your name begins with G, I thought would Gavin and governance. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, with pleasure. I think it's important in terms of governance from a GRI perspective. Governance to me, it means many things, but one thing that's truly important in terms of ESG is avoiding greenwashing. And as a consequence of that, by making a statement, we will do this. And by making that statement, you've set yourselves a target. How are you being judged against that target? The governance aspect of that in terms of GRI is looking at how the management is assessing the effectiveness of reaching that target. So from my perspective, the governance aspect is kind of critical, in the sense of you've got to be as transparent as possible in how you're achieving the statements that you are making. Beyond that, I'll let the others contribute, because I'm dominating things with my governance aspect.
Your GRI.
Yes.
Muriel, do you want to continue on the governance side?
Well, something I forgot to mention during my introduction is I've been trained by b-corp to be a B leader. So b-corp is one of the sustainability framework that is going around, and it's very much a 360 approach, tackling the three letters. But the reason why I refer to b-corp is that this framework starts with what is your mission as a business, and then it encourages the businesses to build the policies, to build the way they run their business, all backed up by the mission. So everything you do within your business, you go back and you feed into your mission, and you build your structure, you build the way, you build your board, you build the way you interact with your employees, you train your employees, etc., all backed up and coming back to your mission. And I think this is the crook of the matter, which is, what do you stand for as a business, and build all your governance. The governance is your skeleton, yeah? It's what holds your business together, but it needs to be meaningful and aligned and feed into your mission.
Richard, do you have anything you wanted to add there?
Well, I agree with both those sentiments, and I think really, in a nutshell, it's about accountability. So, in other words, organisations, need to make commitments to things that they back up and support. And one of the worrying areas around kind of an ESG framework or an ESG strategy, whatever you might like to call it, is where we get away from the box ticking, where we get into the situation where it's not about greenwashing. So therefore, we have global frameworks like GRI, to name but one, that are places of which organisations can use to record and measure and validate what they're saying. Because if you can't do that, then you're just making things up. And I think we had the Green Claims Code that came in last year that found that 40% of UK websites were making claims about sustainability they couldn't validate. And that is now going to be, there are fines that will now be levied against companies that do that. The thing about the global frameworks, and as I say, ESG sits, without these global frameworks, the framework of sustainability and social responsibility as the base layer, and then looking at GRI, the UK Global Compact reports, so the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, which are brilliant up till 2030, and they will be renewed and updated, I'm actually sure. Then you've got the Financial Stability Board Task Force on Climate Change Related Financial Disclosure, which is coming in for the big companies where they have to create disclosure around what they're doing. that will trickle down to the SMEs. So the thing is that we need those frameworks. We need robust, globally recognized frameworks that you can report against to show that your information and data is valid. And that's about being accountable. And I think that's where good corporate governance comes in, because we're seeing a lot of organizations at the moment falling foul of that. And they're being found out because we, the consumers, are scrutinizing this space so much more than we've ever done in the past.
Yeah, and I think people feel more comfortable about calling those companies out as well. There's a couple of questions that have come up, and I'd like to ask them, and then the panelists can answer. One from Kolgoff. In a world filled with a lot of white noise when it comes to what the right thing is to do, what makes ESG stand out from other value-driven approaches to businesses like B Corps or social enterprise models? Muriel, you wanted to answer that.
Well, I think we're comparing two things that are different. ESG is just a very broad denomination for all raft of activity. And it applies to anything that is vaguely related to environment, society, and governance. Yeah. You know, SDG, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, is a framework. B Corp is a framework. Does it make sense? So I think we're comparing things. You know, CSRA is a framework. They're not the same. ESG is a huge you know, blanket terms for a lot of things. SDGs is a framework. Am I making sense? I hope I'm answering Carl's question. Well, this is my perspective anyway.
Yeah, Carl, let us know if she's answered your question. Richard, did you want to add something?
Yeah, basically, because I kind of made a note on this, and I think, you know, while, you know, social responsibility, sustainability impacts, you know, the internal processes and company culture, and that's really what those frameworks do. It's about those internal processes and company structure. ESG is a measurable set of propositions that external partners and investors look at in their evaluation of a company. ESG scoring illustrates a company's identification and quantification of its risks and opportunities. Measurable considerations are beneficial both for external partners and investors and company executives in making strategic decisions. So ESG is a tool, a function that measures social value, social responsibility, sustainability in a way that can be supported through those global frameworks to validate it and make it authentic and real.
Yeah, I think it's there was a question asked earlier, and I know Muriel, you answered it, but I think it's important to talk about this too. The SMEs, you know, at the moment they're struggling to stay afloat. How does ESG fit in for companies that are really struggling, and where do they start with ESG for the SMEs? Richard?
Well, I think I said this earlier, ESG isn't for every business. I mean, you know, it's only really, in my opinion, relevant for businesses that need to demonstrate to its investors, shareholders, and you know, chief executives the value, the long-term value sustainability of the business with regards to investment, acquisition, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that you know, I think if your business is looking for investment, is looking to, you know, to create shareholder value, and it's looking at where their weaknesses are in its current structure and where its opportunities are going forward, then it's absolutely relevant. And it's very easy to start. I mean, again, you can look at the frameworks that exist, as Muriel's just pointed out. B Corp has a great framework that you can adapt to. You know, CSRA with our 4 pillars has a great starting point, great receptacles that people recognize. And you can extrapolate from that and pour the content of that into your relevant ESG reporting, should you need to show that reporting, which, as I say, isn't necessarily relevant for all organizations. But, you know, a lot of it is very commonsensical. And something I try and do is try not to create so much complexity over this. You know, at the essence of ESG, like I said earlier, you know, whatever we call it, it's about doing the right thing to improve the planet we live on, to improve the social conditions that we can live in, to improve our communities. And these things can be very, very simple actions. Like I said, turning the lights out, supporting a local charity, looking after your workforce, you know, doing all of these things, they all contribute. And you know, it's effectively about being a sustainable and responsible business. ESG is just a very convenient way to report that and communicate it to the right audiences.
Yeah, so even if ESG might not be right for a small business, having a sustainability and social responsible strategy is, and it is going to help them to, you know, attract the right staff and to attract more customers. So I think it's important to say that although the ESG framework might not be right for a small business, having a sustainable and socially responsible strategy is going to be right for you, and it is going to help you in your business to achieve more. And it's definitely worth looking at that framework. You're nodding your head there, Gavin. Did you want to add something to that?
I'm naturally disposed to nod my head when I agree with statements. I think we touched on the fact that it's SMEs, and I think it's sort of a requirement for the four of us to actually mention the SME small business club hub, I should say, on the government website. So the SME Climate Hub does recommend a number of actions, including, as Richard says, turn the lights off, etc., change the light bulbs. So that would be a great resource for a small business to actually go to first. As Richard was implying, and Muriel's implied as well, the concepts that lie behind ESG, even if you don't report on an ESG basis, and you don't need to report on an ESG basis, are pretty critical for any business. So I'll stop nodding now.
Yeah, I'm continuing to nod because that's it, the essence of it. And Sam, you said it earlier. The thing is that it's critical for the long-term sustainability of all businesses. Businesses that do not show that they care, that are not responsible, that are not looking after their staff, that are not doing things to contribute to the environment, won't be in business. It's as simple as that. The future shape of business will be measured in social value and environmental value as much as financial value. And we're already seeing, you know, a whole new pool of talent coming into the workplace that will not work for businesses that do not deliver on their social value, their social responsibility, their sustainability values, and all of those things. So irrelevant as to whether you will go on to use ESG to record and report it, it's about having a structure in your organization that helps you deliver on all of those things. And you know, and you don't need to put 1,000 things on a piece of paper and only do 8 of them well. You know, pick the things that align with your business, create the capacity within your business to deliver them, and most importantly, impact report them and communicate them. Because without impact reporting, there's no value in what you're doing. And that's where you really show the true value, by showing that we're making a difference. And communicate that to your staff, to your customers, to your consumers, to your shareholders, to all stakeholders. And you can't go wrong. It's just about starting that journey. And then, you know, ESG just becomes very valuable in the sense that that's a great place to use the measurement and reporting tools to show that you are delivering the value in those areas. Yeah,
we've got lots of questions, and this I think is a really relevant one to leadership and a lot of people that are leaving big businesses. How can a business retain leadership needed to drive ESG strategies? Richard, do you want to go on with that one?
Well, I mean, we had a whole conversation a couple of days about ethical leadership. Does ethical leadership start with your manager? Well, it might do. Your senior management, your senior staff, they're not necessarily leaders because they have senior roles in the organization. So that ethical and moral leadership may come within the organization in an unexpected place. It's about creating capacity and enablement for that leadership to shine through. But you absolutely do need that leadership to drive the agenda. You need to identify the people within your company, your organization, who are going to come together and actually kind of make this happen. But it has to be endorsed by the senior management, by your chief exec or whatever. So whether the chief exec is the individual who's leading that is neither here nor there. It's that person has to endorse and make sure it happens. So we've heard so many times in the last 8 months of a company saying, right, we're going to go employ an ESG manager, we're going to employ an CSR manager, we're going to employ, and they put them in a room and give them no power. And off they go. And that's not right. The thing is that if you're going to enable an organization to deliver meaningful, sustainable and environmental and socially responsible initiatives, you've got to give them the time, the capacity, and invest in it, because you will get that return on investment. And that's the word. It's an investment in something that you're doing already. It's just a question of recognizing it and making something valuable out of it.
Yeah, Muriel, you've got your hand up there. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I think for me, just to add to what Richard said, is you need people that are courageous. You need people that are comfortable to become trendsetters. You need people that are comfortable with becoming, disruptors. I've been lucky to work with, quite a few businesses that have said, okay, we're small, but we're going to really change the industry that we are in. And, the way, the concept of the service, the business model is being done. And I know, Sam, we both collaborating with this fantastic, law firm that has decided to disrupt the way law is being practiced. It's just, it takes courage and conviction and really bringing people on board. And yes, you need to make sure that you are a people leader, because you want all your people to be behind your ideas. However, a good leader also listens. So if your personal convictions do not resonate with the rest of your team, what do you have to learn from your team? So it's a combination of that. But for me, courage to be disruptive and to change business model is essential.
Yeah, there's lots of questions coming in, and I'm going to try and get through as many as possible, but we may not, so I'll try and answer them. Maybe we'll follow up with some of the questions, but I think this is really also an important one, and that is that a lot of companies are struggling with cost cutting and product quality issues. How can being sustainable on one side, you want to be more sustainable, but people have this image that being sustainable is going to cost more. Who wants to answer that? Gavin, do you want to take that question?
I knew that was coming to me. I would say that if you go down the sustainability route, and if you use sustainability to forecast forward about potential risk coming towards your business, you can then start innovating and making sort of changes to the way you do things, which reduce your costs. And there's also a view that prior to the latest cost of living crisis, people were prepared to pay slightly more for sustainable products. I think in this cost of living crisis, I don't think people will abandon their principles as quickly as people are suggesting. I know that government minister suggested we should go buy low value brand items, which is a little bit contentious. I think there's been a report only today about the agriculture and dairy industries, and the implication is that we are likely to have less meat in our diets going forward. So there are sort of fundamental changes that are going to impact us anyway. And I think as a consequence of that, to be more sustainable is likely to be the future. And as a consequence of that, we will then be producing items and things that will be costing less, and we'll be making savings in that regard.
Yeah, go ahead, Miriam.
I'm not sure if we're saying the same thing, David, and the beauty of the panel is disagreement as well. So for me, it's buying less but buying better, buying things that are going to last 10 years as opposed to 2. And I'm not going to name any brands, but just an example of fast fashion. The fact that you can buy a t-shirt for £2 and you wear it twice and then you throw it away is not sustainable. Buying a t-shirt that you pay 50 quid and you wear for 5 years is sustainable. It's really, again, I'm going back to changing behaviors. And also, if we go back to food, there's somehow a disconnect between people and where food come from. And food costs, let's respect and let's, pause for 10 seconds and say thank you to the farmers who are really working super hard to feed us. It's unfair on them for us to expect to pay very little for our food. It's, what do you buy? How do you buy it? And making sure that everybody along the value chain, earns enough to survive. Because if the farmers can't survive, we can't eat. So I think it's about, stop looking at just cost, but think about the entire picture behind each item. It's more complicated, but we have to.
We've got 6 minutes left, so I'm going to give you a minute and a half each. But please, from you, and we will try and respond to all the other questions in over the coming days. But Muriel, let's start with you. If you're looking at one big thing that a company should be thinking about to on their sustainability, social responsibility, ESG, CSR journey, what's the big thing that they should start and focus on?
What's your purpose? What do you want your people to get up in the morning and you know, work for your firm? And what do you want them to achieve? What do you stand for? What is your mission? You know, how as a business are you going to contribute to the solution? I think I would start with that, and then everything flows from there. And I know you've given me 1.5 minutes, but it's making it, you know, define your purpose, make it live within your business, bring your people on board, and acknowledge that, one, you can't do it on your own, so it's a collaborative effort. It's collaboration with stakeholders, especially the external one, so that you benefit from the effort of others. So purpose and collaboration. That's it.
Thank you. Gavin, I'm going to come to you next.
Well, at the risk of repeating what Muriel said, my personal view is not dissimilar from Muriel's, is think about where you are in terms of the context of your business, in terms of the impacts you have on the environment and the impacts the environment has upon your business. Think about your stakeholders, employees, the community, customers. Think about how you're affecting them and how they affect you. Then just gradually work around that principle, decide on, as Muriel said, on your purpose and work towards that. And as Muriel stated, you know, the sustainability sector as a whole is pretty collaborative. We will work with people. We want to achieve feeling good, a good purpose. And by that very nature, it's cooperative. So if you have any doubts, ask. It's not rocket science. Now, this is where Richard tells me it is.
Richard, over to you.
So no, it's not rocket science, it's straightforward. And I'm just picking up on the chat. I love the attitude, the comment Nasa put about human social responsibility. And I think this is a great way to finish, because it taps into what Muriel said and what Gavin said, that we don't talk about CSR, we talk about social responsibility, because the C has to be inclusive. It has to involve us all. The C should be for community, it should be for collaboration, it should be for charity, it should be for climate, it should be for cognition, for creative. The C is a mutually inclusive C that involves us all, because if we're not all involved, we won't make a difference. So whether we can feed that into social responsibility, and that social responsibility then feeds into ESG, or whether it's about building that long-term profitable and sustainable business, it's about making sure that we are engaged, that whatever we call it, it enriches the quality of our lives by allowing us to be able to deliver on these topics within the organizations that we work in. And that will build a better world for future generations and a cohesive community for us all to live and work in.
Thank you, and that's really great. I'd like to thank all of my panelists. It's been such an interesting conversation. I see from the chat that people are saying thank you, and that they have understood the conversation. So we really appreciate that. If anyone wants to get in touch with, we partner with CSR Accreditation. We work very closely with Muriel and Gavin as consultants. Please do get in touch. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you've got any further questions, I would be happy to respond to you directly on LinkedIn. I can always put you in touch with people in sustainability and social responsibility. We have our next webinar in a month's time, Why Net Zero Matters, and we're really going to delve deep into getting into net zero. Can you get into net zero? Is it for everyone? And get into the detail of that too. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all the attendees. Have a good day. Bye. If we can end the recording there, Richard, thank you.